All right. So welcome, folks. Glad you could come. It looks like we have a very good turnout of extension agents, and I've been looking forward to this session, knowing that agents are shy and don't usually share what they think. And of course, that's silly. I've had very good learning sessions with county agents, and appreciate you all coming. My name is Paul Vincelli, and I'm going to just direct your attention to our assistant directors, Candace Pollock-Moore from the SARE programs. Candace.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Candace Pollock-Moore, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Southern Region SARE program. And I'm also the grant manager for our 3 small grant programs. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and just going to be given a little bit of background on the SARE outreach team, who we are and what we do, and then kind of go through some short introductions with each of the team members, and then I'll turn it back over to Paul to continue on with the presentation. So the SARE outreach team, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, but we visit with stakeholders in the states throughout the southern region for 2 specific reasons. One is to raise awareness of the SARE program in terms of the grants that we do offer and the educational resources that we do provide. And then also to foster state collaborations among stakeholders in terms of finding solutions to some of the sustainable ag challenges that they're facing. Let's see here, let me go to the next slide. So our SARE outreach team consists of the following individuals. Dara Monifa Cooper is our communications specialist for the Southern Region SARE program. She's currently based out of Virgin Islands. Patrick Lillard serves as an NGO representative on our administrative council. David Redditch is our professional development program manager out of the Kerr Center for Sustainable Agriculture in Oklahoma, and he is also the manager of the professional development program grant. Brennan Washington is our 1890 land grant liaison and the limited resource outreach specialist for the region. And Paul introduced himself already. He is our 1862 land grant liaison based out of University of Kentucky. So I'll turn it back over to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Candace. Next is our colleagues from where are we, South Carolina? And Matt, why don't you go ahead and take it from me, because
you've been here all day, Paul. I just want to thank everybody for joining. This is a special effort on the part of the Southern SARE administrators to enlighten and encourage South Carolina faculty, administrators, and particularly, I would say, extension agents to apply for the resources that Southern SARE has. I don't know everybody I see logging on, but I see most of the teams represented. And I'll mention a little more about my role later. They'll mention it, and then I'll finish up. But I really do appreciate such a good turnout from the extension agents, and you can learn a lot more from this than just from the stuff I do. Because there's so many, we're not going to go for individual introductions. If you would, I'd appreciate it if you put in the chat your name and what you do, what kind of an agent you are, just so we have an idea who joined. And Jonathan, do you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to say that I'm Jonathan Wyndham. For those who don't know me, I'm the program assistant for the SARE program to both Clemson and South Carolina State. So if you need something related to resources or questions, feel free to email me.
So I guess it's back to me, right, Candace? Am I next? I think so. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, let me start with this slide here. This is a list of our our hopes, dreams, and expectations for the meeting today. And we had some very good interaction in the previous sessions in our virtual site visit here today, and have been really appreciative of the wonderful preparation that Matt and Jonathan have done leading up to this meeting. So thanks for making it possible, you too. What we hope for as a result of this meeting is, first of all, maybe a better understanding of SARE on your part, and resulting in more fundable proposals from South Carolina. That would be the hope for your sake. Although you'll see later on, South Carolina is doing reasonably well in that metric. So number two, the second bullet point is to understand, for us to understand your needs, South Carolina's needs, resources and interests in sustainability, and with the outcome that our grant program might better meet your needs in South Carolina. Third is to build confidence in SARE decisions as appropriate, with an outcome of a better understanding of the review process. Next slide, please. So we would like your input and ideas, and there'll be a substantial time for open discussion at the end of the presentation. And so here are some of the questions we may repost. We hope you'll be able to provide commentary on these. But what are the missed opportunities for South Carolina with our SARE program? And number two is how can SARE's visibility and engagement be improved here in South Carolina? And three, do you have any suggestions in terms of changes or improvements to the SARE grant programs and other the outreach programs as well? So next slide. So the SARE program for us is, Southern SARE, Southern Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program. We're the red region, of course, and then there are three others that are funded as well by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And let's just move on to the next slide. We don't need to study this. So SARE, of course, stands for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. It's a USDA program. It was authorized in 1985 with the Farm Bill, and currently the program as a whole receives $36 million in funding, administered through the four regions that you just saw. And the goal of the SARE program is to support farmers and other stakeholders, including researchers and educators, to explore and develop and advance sustainable ag practices. And finally, the primary tool of our work is the grants. We have 5 grants programs, but as you'll hear, we also do provide support for outreach and other activities. So really good stuff coming out of the program. Next slide. All right, so we kind of like this picture. It's a moment of silliness for my family, but all of us on behalf of the SARE program, thank you for your role in producing food and the food system that we enjoy. Thank you very much for that, because it helps feed our families. So it's a good place to start. Next slide. So I like to present just a little bit, very little bit on the broad issue of sustainability. And so in my opinion, the hunter-gatherer existence was and has been the only truly sustainable food system in human history. Yeah, it was, it still exists in some places, but it was existed as the sole food system for tens and tens of thousands of years. But the problem, of course, is that the system can't support even 1% of us. So that's not the solution to sustainability challenges. Next slide. The most sustainable food system that I've ever witnessed is shown here. This is in eastern Nicaragua, and that is one of the native individuals that lives there. And they live by cutting down portions of the forest, which looks very destructive, but that lays down vegetation that decays and releases nutrition for a period of a few years. It's not a high productivity system, but it provides what they need. It looks destructive until you realize, well, they're only doing this in selected portions of the forest at any one time. And within 5 or 10 years, they'll let it regrow in those areas. So they always have forest as the primary vegetation, but they have these pockets of sort of a low input agriculture. And it's a very good system, but the problem is that likewise doesn't produce enough food to support our present population. So that's not going to work. And the reason why I like to show these slides is because it sort of highlights the challenge that we face when we think about sustainability. We have an idea of where we want to go in some way, but these are challenging problems, and makes life interesting, but it also helps us understand why there are programs like the SARE program, and why what we have is probably not enough. But we're making progress, and it makes for exciting times. Next slide. This is my last slide of the series, and how does SARE think of what sustainability means? And there is a formal definition from Congress, which I don't show because it's quite good, but it's quite wordy. This is also a representation that I think originates with SARE, but is certainly propagated by SARE. And there are 3 pillars, as you can see, and a lot of you have already seen this before. Profitability or economic viability for farmers, farm families, and rural communities. That's they're not ranked, but we don't have sustainability without farms, and we don't have farms if they're not profitable. Stewardship is commonly understood as a pillar of sustainability, and with the environment, of course, in mind. And then the third, which I admit as a natural scientist, I probably have not focused enough on this over the years, but that's the quality of life pillar. And quality of life refers, of course, to the farmers and the farm families and the rural communities and the urban communities who consume our food. So it's a pretty big one, actually. They're the quality of life pillar. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Candace, for the next step. Not Kansas, Patrick.
Thanks, Paul. So as Candace mentioned, I'm an NGO representative on the Southern SARE Administrative Council. So I'll give you a little background on SARE and specifically Southern SARE. So as Paul mentioned, SARE was funded through the 1985 Farm Bill. And it's really unique in that it almost reminds me of cooperative extension, that it's kind of, it's definitely very distinct that it had support from the deans at land-grant universities, and the land grants actually provide some support primarily through kind of the state coordinators and their positions. But it looks different depending on each state. Also, Southern SARE is different from the other regions in that within each of our states, we have 2 land-grant universities. We have the 1890 and the 1862. And so each one, we have 2 state coordinators per state. We also have a program assistant per state. And again, kind of how those partnerships between 1890, 1862, and where the land grant, the program assistant is different within each state. Okay, next slide. And so as I think Paul had the map, that SARE is divided into 4 regions, and we're in Southern SARE, but each region has its different needs. And I think this is one of the great things that I've learned about SARE since being involved, is it's a federal program, but the way it's structured really allows for quite a bit of flexibility within each region. So each region has receives the same amount of federal funding, but it goes through a host institution. And so for Southern SARE, that's the University of Georgia, and our director is Jeff Jordan. And then the Kerr Center in Oklahoma implements the professional development program. And so even though it's a federal program, it's administered through a host institution, which gives it a lot of flexibility. And that also allows the administrative council quite a bit of room to modify the grants to make sure they're meeting the needs of that region. And the Administrative Council is made up of stakeholders across the whole region. And what we try to do is have as many different voices of the Administrative Council as possible. So there's 23 members. There's 11 agency representatives, which are appointed by their respective agencies. So that would include 1862s, 1890s, the USDA ARS. We have an USDA agroforestry representative. And then we also have, 12 positions that are from nominated individuals. And so those people can apply for, and the Administrative Council votes on them. And those include 7 producers, 3 NGOs, 1 agribusiness, and 1 quality of life. And again, we try to get as much diversity on the Administrative Council as possible. So we want geographic diversity, demographic diversity, and then for the producers also a diversity of operations. So we want as many different voices that represent our Southern region on the Administrative Council. And part of that is because we're voting on awarding the funding. So one note there is when submitting proposals, just remember that farmers, NGO representatives, scientists, all are going to be reviewing the proposals. So you have to write it in a way that's easily understood by multiple audiences. And so how the grant proposals get reviewed is, so we have kind of 2 different groups that review it. We have the technical reviewers that will include, well, hopefully Candace will talk about that. I'll let her talk about how you can even volunteer to be a technical reviewer. But from the Administrative Council, all Administrative Council representatives review proposals. Some of us review ones that are particular to our position. So the producers are on the producer committee and they review all the producer and on-farm grants. I'm on the professional development committee. And so I review the PDP proposals. And then all AC members will review the research and education proposals. So what we usually do is we review them in our little committees, and then we bring our recommendations to the full Administrative Council and vote on which ones to fund. So that's kind of a snapshot of our regions, how they're structured, and kind of our process in reviewing proposals. And I'll pass it to Dara.
Yes, all right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. So you've got a little bit of the history of SARE and how it's broken down. So here's just a little bit more, just an overview of the Southern SARE grants. So we have the research and education, and all of these have their own appropriate acronyms, of course. So when you start hearing people say PDP and R&E and those types of things, you know where they come from. Research and education, professional development, graduate student, on-farm research, and producer. And as you can see on the slide, the research and education grants are our flagship grants. All right, and so $400,000 for the research grants, and with $50,000 going to education. Those are the ones that we tend to have a lot of call for. I don't know if you can hear that airplane, but I'll speak a little louder. So there's a pre-proposal and full proposal process. And the call for proposals opens in March for funding in 2023. Candace will get into a little bit more about that later. And for the professional development grants, these are like include the trainers, things like that. There's also the pre-proposal and full proposal process, capped at $80,000, with the call opening in July and funding within the following year. The grad student grants are for master's and PhD students, and that's at $16,500, with the call opening in February. So that's coming up soon for funding later in the year. The on-farm research are for ag professionals who work with farmers. And that's considered our mini grant because it's a little lower than what the others usually offer for $20,000, with the call opening in September for funding the following year. And the producer grants are for farmers and farmer groups. 15,000 for individual farmers, 20,000 for farmer groups, with the call opening in September and funding in 2023. Next slide. So if we get into South Carolina's grant history, since 1988, South Carolina has been awarded $3,280,190 in grants to support its 67 projects. And as you can see in the bullets and also in the map there, South Carolina is within the southern region, so that's highlighted. You see that number of total funding, the 67 grant projects since '88, and those are split through the producer grants, which were 19 of those, 6 graduate student, 10 on-farm, 11 professional development, and 15 research and education grants. And you can see the various amounts that those were awarded. Slide. All right, so going further, the grant history, you see R&E, PDP, and graduate. And in red, we've highlighted where South Carolina stands on that list of the various southern region states and so on. So it's about 10th down with 15 grants, summing to about 2.1 million for the R&Es, about 6 down with 11 grants, 648,000 for the PDPs, and for the graduate, 6 grants at 73,000 plus. And in terms of on-farm and producer, you're at about 10 grants with 142,377, and that falls at about 8th within the southern region. And for producer grants, 19 grants at 171,910. It falls at about 9 on the producer grants within the southern region.
Okay, our 2 biggest grant programs are the research and education grants and the professional development grants. The research and education are broken up into 2 grants, research projects up to 400,000 and education projects up to 50,000. Now, the education side, being under the R&E, allows direct farmer education, which is different than PDP. It looks at teams of researchers, an interdisciplinary approach. It focuses on systems, and farmers are required to be a part of the grant. There's a pre-proposal and a full proposal process involved. March, the pre-proposal goes out. In June, they're due. August, the ones that are selected from the pre-proposal are invited to submit full proposals. They are due in November. They are reviewed, and then they are awarded at the February AC meeting. PDP is a train the trainer, which means you train individuals who will go out and train farmers. We say 80,000 is the upper limit, but or says that 80,000 is preferred, but there is really no upper limit. But we need a clear justification for more than that. It also has a pre-proposal and full proposal process. The target audience, Extension and RCS, FSA, Department of Ag staff, nonprofit NGOs that are go out and train farmers. The timeline's a little shorter than R&E. The call goes out for pre-proposals in July. They're due in August. October, after a review process, the pre-proposals are invited, the ones that are selected to submit full proposals. They're due in November. The full proposals are reviewed by a technical review committee initially, and then the subcommittee of the AC, the PDP committee, reviews after the technical reviewers. And then at the February meeting, the full AC votes on which ones to grant funding to.
Okay, I'm going to go through our 3 smaller grant programs that are available. The first one is graduate student grants, which Dara did mention that are offered specifically for master's and PhD students. This is probably one of our most popular grant programs that we do provide, and it's one of the most competitive. The graduate student grants are a perfect opportunity to introduce students who are new to their master's or PhD programs to the grant writing experience. It helps build the relationship between the student and the SARE program, because a lot of times you'll have a student who applied for and received funding for a graduate student grant, then went on to pursue their academic careers, and then still kept SARE in the back of their minds as a funding opportunity for their research interests. It introduces students to sustainable agriculture, and it also starts to help build their research portfolios, because a lot of times the graduate students who do complete graduate student grants will publish a research report in a peer-reviewed journal. Graduate student grant call for proposals are going to be opening February 4th, with the proposals being awarded in August of this year, and the projects officially start on September 1st. The on-farm research grants are a good grant program for extension agents. It is an opportunity for extension agents to work directly with a farmer on a small sustainable ag research project. We call our on-farm research grants mini grants, because of the short 2-year time frame, and then just a small amount of money that's provided, which is enough to do small demonstration trials, variety trials, any other kind of maybe production-oriented or marketing-oriented work with a farmer, to collect preliminary data for the opportunities to be able to step into a larger grant program, either with SARE, for example, with the research and education grants, or with a larger USDA grant. The on-farm research grants are ideal for early career or young researchers who are new to their university and are looking to get their feet wet with grant writing experience. It does encourage that collaboration with the farmer, and does prepare the researchers for the research and education grant program, which does require a larger number of farmers to be involved in that grant project. It's also a good overall introduction to the SARE program, because the on-farm research grants are a much simpler grant process. There's no pre-proposal requirement involved with that particular grant, and the parameters of the call for proposal are not as strenuous as those related to the research and education grant. And it also helps build that research portfolio for those researchers looking to get published. So the call for proposals for the on-farm research grants open in September, with funding in February the following year. The producer grants function similarly to the on-farm research grants, except the difference is that the producer grants are specifically designed for the farmer to apply as the PI on the grant. But we do encourage farmers to collaborate with a researcher, or, for example, an extension agent on that research project, to help them through the research process, the data analysis, the outreach component of their project. It's a 2-year project with $15,000 awarded to individual farmers and $20,000 for farmer groups. And the call for proposals follows the same timeline as the on-farm research grants, opens in September with funding in February the following year. The grants that we do offer are all very competitive grants. And so in order to be successful in being funded, there are a couple of things that we encourage applicants to keep in mind when applying for a particular grant program. This slide here kind of goes through some of the things that we've seen in call for proposals that would cause that proposal to be rejected. Broadly, broad strokes, you want your proposal obviously to have that sustainable agriculture component, and to fall in line with SARE's mission and vision in terms of supporting or addressing in some fashion the 3 pillars of sustainability that Paul mentioned earlier in the presentation. You also want a topic that is innovative and unique, something that has been extensively researched already. May not necessarily, it may be interesting topic, but it may not necessarily need to be funded by SARE because the resources already exist that would help answer the question that you're already seeking. And also, you want to be looking at a project that is not necessarily a Band-Aid to conventional agriculture, but something that looks at a more of a transformative change in terms of supporting sustainability on the farm and in the community. Specifically, you want to focus on your approaches and methods. You want to have a strong research methods outlined in terms of how you're going to conduct your research. And you also want to be mindful of your budgets. You want to make sure that what you're asking for in your budget is going to line up with what you say you're going to test. And then also you really need to focus on things that are allowable and not allowable, not only with any of the SARE grant programs that you would be interested in applying for, as there are things in the budget that we simply just cannot fund. And I'll turn it over to Brennan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking some time after a busy day to join us today. So Southern SARE's main reason for being is to fund grants to advance the cause of sustainable agriculture. But we do have other ways that we can assist you in helping you with that mission. And one of those are our outreach funds. So we provide discretionary funds to help fund outreach efforts around sustainable agriculture. And this funding takes several forms: financial support for conferences, workshops, and field days, assistance with educational materials and acquiring them, our Sustainable Ag Leadership Program, and our Professional Development Program, particularly as it applies to travel scholarships. Next slide. So we provide sponsorship support for conferences, field days, workshops, and other educational events. And, sometime in extension, that's, it could be kind of hard trying to find funding to put on these. Well, you can apply to our sponsorship support to help you put on these type of things. And in order to be considered, it has to pertain to an event. The event has to be in the Southern region. It has to serve farmers or audiences who serve farmers. It needs to include an outreach component, and it needs to relate to sustainable agriculture. So two of the most recent ones that I can give you an example of, we are probably going to fund the South Carolina Black Farmers Conference this spring in St. Helena. I think that's the first conference they're having of that type down there on the islands. And we also provide a small amount of funding support to a veterans organization, Mr. Henry Jones, in Gray Court, South Carolina. And they're going to be putting on a blueberry production and propagation workshop down there in Gray Court. So that's the type of stuff that these funds can be used for. This is not a grant program the way you've heard some of the other programs explained. This is just money that comes back to us that we rather not send back to Washington. So we try and find outlets to push it out to help you in your work with farmers and organizations who help farmers. There's no deadline per se. We take applications on an ongoing basis. And as long as your conference application, your conference proposal or your workshop proposal meets our guidelines, and we have the money at the time you apply, then typically it'll get funded. I can approve anything up to $3,000, and above that, it needs to go through either our executive committee or our administrative committee for approval. Next slide. Our Sustainable Ag Leadership Program is actually a child of the pandemic. As we started piling up money that we couldn't spend either through grants or because we weren't traveling anywhere or because we couldn't sponsor in-person conference, we tried to think of a way to continue to support sustainable agriculture through the Southeast. So we came up with this leadership program. We just closed applications for the third cohort. We've completed 2 cohorts already. And the goal is to champion leadership contributions of historically underserved audiences. Participants receive sponsorship support of up to $3,000 to conduct education and training activities in various areas of sustainable agriculture. We target this program at historically underserved farmers and ranchers who have demonstrated leadership in their communities. Farmer groups have demonstrated leadership contribution in their communities, as well as nonprofits and other community groups who serve those audiences. And the funding supports education or training activities. It must support pertain to sustainable agriculture and can be in person or online. So that's Alicia Chevers with Alabama A&M. She received, I think she was in our second cohort. She receives funding to do a business planning and financial planning workshop with underserved farmers in Alabama. Closer to home, Dr. Najma Thomas on St. Helena Island, who was in our very first cohort, got some funds to develop some training for the Gullah Geechee farmers on growing for market, creating market gardens to sell to for them to sell to the local communities. So that's what these type of, that's what this leadership program is designed to do. At some point, I hope we get permanent funding for this, but depending on who gets selected in the in this cohort that we're reviewing applications for now, we will have funded close to 45 or 50 people and participants in this cohort. So that's sustainable ag leadership. I think that's all I have. Thanks for taking your time today.
Okay, moving on to the PDP program. Another aspect of it is state training funds and state coordinators. Each state in the South has 2 state coordinators that are based at the land grants. We have 2 land grants in each state, except for Alabama, which has 3 with Tuskegee, and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands have 1. The model state program receives $30,000 to help pay for a program assistant to help with the program and implementation, and then $20,000 in funds to be used directly for training. Only state with a state plan of work is Alabama, and they don't have a program assistant, but they do get the training funds. The travel scholarships, we do have a pool of funds that are a result of expiring grants and where there's funding left over, and we use those to offer travel scholarships. And it varies from year to year depending on the amount of the expiring funds. We manage it through the state coordinators. If a request comes to me for under $3,000, I can approve it directly. But if it is over $3,000 or above, I have to take it through either the SARE Executive Committee, where we have a call monthly, or the full Administrative Council if they happen to be meeting that month. Mentor farmer travel is allowed, and mentor farmers, or think of farm leaders who are going to come up with new information, knowledge, and bring it back. The training can be outside of the Southern region SARE. It does not have to stay in the Southern region. They must meet the train-the-trainer model. So there must be an aspect of this that's going to provide knowledge and information that can be brought back to conduct trainings in your state, county, in the South. This is a little different program. The Fellows program is managed out of National SARE, but a extension agent is selected in each SARE region, 1 per year. So at any given time, there are 8 fellows in the program. They go through a 2-year rotation, and they have 1 spring and 1 fall training in each of the SARE regions. So when they graduate from the program, they visited all 4 areas of the SARE program. They learn about sustainable ag. They also learn how it's different in each SARE region. Program that's come out of this is called Reading the Farm. And that's where a farm is selected, and the agents work with the farmer, ask questions, learn how the farm operates, and then together recommend ways to improve the sustainability of the farm.
All right, so you've been learning a whole lot about SARE and the grants and all the different opportunities, even in addition to grants that we provide. Just this is further emphasizing that SARE offers much more than grants. So someone touched already a little bit on the conference sponsorships, and I'll show you a little more information about that after the next slide. But just so you know that there are some provided sponsorship support for conferences, field days, workshops, and other educational events. And so we'll get into a little bit more so you can see what that is, and you'll have the link for that in the chat in a few. Also, there's a learning center. So the Resources and Learning Center, there's a web page on the website that has a list of national publications, including fact sheets, bulletins, and books, from building a sustainable business to building soils for better crops, crop rotation on organic farms, farmer's guide to business structures, as you can see further down the list, all the way to new farmers markets and much, much more. So the information is going to be a lot that you can find. And next slide, we'll go through a little bit about how you can find it right in a moment. So out of all the resources and educational materials to this point, 291 is the number of, so far, different resources specific to the Southern region. And again, the link will be provided to you so you can get to that resources and learning page. And 53% of producers reported using a new production practice after reading a SARE publication. So 64% of producers said that their SARE project helped them achieve higher sales. Direct impact of utilizing SARE resources and educational materials, which you can find. I'm going to show you the website right now. Right here on our resources and learning page. And here, let's say we typed in soils and we wanted to do a search, but we wanted to break down that search into which region. And we're going to use the South. Let's say I click on something else here. The results on the right will change immediately so that whatever you're putting in, you'll be able to find what you need to. Maybe let's look for bulletins. I don't know. So there are no bulletins. So then instead of bulletins, let's look for something else. Manuals and guides. And as you can see, the results here will lead you to whatever exists for that. Back to conference sponsorships. Here's the information I was telling you about on our About Southern SARE page. It's under that. To be considered for sponsorship support, here are your bullets that will help you to understand what you need to make sure you do. Make sure that it pertains to an event within the Southern region, serve domestic audiences, include farmer education and outreach components, and relates to sustainable agriculture. So there's a lot of information on our website. And so you will be able to find that. The resources and education link was put there in the chat, and there's much, much more information on the site if you were to just go and take a view.
Okay, and as David mentioned earlier, that each state does have state ag coordinators at each of the land grant institutions. So for South Carolina, this slide provides you with the names and contact information for state ag coordinators for Clemson and for South Carolina State University. And Jonathan serves as the program assistant for both of the state ag coordinators. So for those on the call who might be interested in any of the SARE grant programs or any SARE educational resources, I mean, you're invited to contact any of us with information, but you can also reach out to your state ag coordinator for that information as well. And I'll turn it over now to Paul to start fielding any questions anybody has, and then for the next steps.
Paul, let me jump in here first.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead, Matt.
as was mentioned earlier, the state program has a little bit of money that Dr. Dossi and I can spread around to help fund really kind of local train the trainer activities. And this is not really your normal producer meetings, but more like if you need some support to do an in-service training for other agents. As they mentioned, we're available to discuss proposal ideas and applicability, but the big proposals do not go through me or Dr. Adasi. They go to the Southern SARE. When Dr. Redditch lets me know they have some excess travel funds, I send that out and encourage you to, if there's a meeting that you would love to go to, but you don't have money and you can learn something and bring back to train some other agents or train, excuse me, producers. That's a good source of it. Jonathan has a good supply. We have a good supply of the SARE pubs here at PD Rec. Jonathan, I think just this week, or if not last week, sent out an announcement to you all again, telling you what we've got and how to get them. That includes a bunch of thumb drives, which has most of the SARE library on the thumb drive, except they're a couple years, not the latest. And I do want to encourage you, if you haven't written grants or you're a little sketchy on writing grants, a good way to learn is by reviewing grants. So if you'll volunteer to review grants for SARE, you'll really quickly recognize what makes a good grant and what makes a bad proposal, what makes a good proposal. Also want to say that we've had 3 sessions today: administrators, faculty, and extension agents. Tomorrow we've got 2 for NGOs and for other stakeholders like producers. So if you know anybody in those 2 categories that you think might be interested in applying for a producer grant or learning more about SARE, get with Jonathan and he can give them a link to register, and they can participate tomorrow and learn about this. I'd like to see more producers participating. So that's my spiel.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate that contribution, and really appreciate you and Jonathan for the excellent work you've done in setting this up. So what we want to do now is just really simply open up the floor for conversation, discussion, expression of concerns, thanks. It doesn't anything you want to say to us. We'd just like to get your input about what has worked well in your experience, what may not work as well. So I'll just leave the floor open for comments as they occur to you.
I have kind of a general question, kind of a broad question. Corey Tanner, I'm the horticulture program team director for Extension here in South Carolina, for Clemson Extension here in South Carolina. What's SARE's position on controlled environment agriculture? We're seeing a big push for that in South Carolina, and is that considered sustainable ag? Just kind of generally, what's SARE's stance around that subject?
Yeah, great question. I did a podcast on controlled environment production at the University of Kentucky. So yeah, it's an interest. But let me, before I make any comments, maybe I'll ask my colleagues who've been doing this longer. What do you think about that?
When you say controlled environments, are you talking about cold frames, greenhouses, hydroponics, aquaponics, all of the above?
Generally, all of the above. And we're seeing a lot of interest in, kind of high-tech greenhouse operations as well as indoor growing of food. So I can kind of limit it to food crops maybe, but kind of all of the above.
Yeah.
A lot of the work on, we've done projects on cold frames. So season extension or season modification using cold frame technology. Aquaponics, yes, but greenhouse production, that's one I don't know that I've seen to date, the really intensive ones.
Yeah, Corey, and that's something that we probably would like to see some grants for. And this is where your social sustainability is. Down here in Georgia, Fort Valley, they put in a very large CEU operation. Apparently it's pretty productive. I think they have 20 acres under glass. And apparently one of the biggest issues that popped up from it is the amount of light it throws off, especially at night. I understand you drive down there at 12 midnight and it looks like you're in the middle of the day. So there's really some social aspects about it. We haven't gotten that many other beyond greenhouse and hoop houses, but another type of growing that you're talking about. And one of the things we would like people to research is that really a sustainable growing method? Because we don't know that yet, so.
Yeah, Corey, I spoke to, just drawing a blank on his name, the University of Kentucky horticulturist. You probably know him. He does a lot of work in these controlled environment systems. And I asked him the key question, I think, as we got into the interview, and basically, is this going to replace, field production? And he said, no, it's sort of it's not a niche. It's just another area where we're going to produce food, but not going to replace the field environment by any means, according to him. So, I think, Brennan's right. Maybe there's some work to be had in outlining some interesting questions and seeking funding for them, in particular as they relate to that sustainability triangle.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good question. So has anybody had an experience with SARE that was that maybe we can learn from? We had some interesting discussion on that in previous sessions.
Well, since no one has any comments on that, I do have another question. How many of you are working around any projects that deal with fisheries? Because I would really like to see more applications coming to us that deal with fisheries, or oysters, clams, just all that stuff, especially along your coastline. And I'm just curious at how many of you extension agents are actually working with those folks out there who's doing that type of work.
Okay,
This is Kimberly Baker. Probably the closest we have is Lance Beecher. He's our aquaponics and fisheries specialist. I know we've submitted for our aquaponics grant in relation to food safety, but I know he does the most fisheries work that I'm aware of with us at Clemson, and I'll certainly relay the message to him. He's on my team.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to, SARE funded a project several years ago with oysters off the coast of Georgia. We've also funded freshwater prawns or crayfish in Kentucky. Some work there years ago. That was a producer grant.
Very good. So we're here for, to serve you all as well as, help improve our programs. So less chance to.
Well, and the other thing too is if you have a topic area, I think we've neglected to bring this up, but this group with extension agents, if you're curious about what SARE funds, all funded projects are listed on the national website in terms of there's a search engine on there. So if there's a topic area you're curious about what projects have been done like an R&E in the past or are currently active, you can go onto that website and put in a keyword search to see what's out there. And the final reports are all available there as well.
Yeah, I'll echo something else, David. I know you may have said in this session, but you've said it in previous ones, and that is, if you have an idea for a project that you think might be fundable through SARE, but you're not sure, then read the call. David's been very clear about that. Make sure you read the whole call, but then contact the program leaders, the ones that you've just heard describe the programs, and they'll be glad to help you decide if it's a topic that should be put forth in the pool of proposals.
And what I've run into in doing that, especially with PDP, is the understanding what it means to be a train the trainer program. Many times someone will come to me with an idea and it will not meet the train the trainer model, but in the process of discussing it, we can come up with ways to turn it into a train the trainer model.
Mm-hmm. Great. I don't want to keep you any longer than the necessary. We've got, I'm sure there's emails and stuff to answer, but if there are no other questions or comments, thank you all for coming.
Yep. Thank you all for coming, and thanks to the Southern SARE administrators for having enough interest in what we're doing in South Carolina to encourage y'all to ask for money.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Take care, y'all.
All right. Bye.